Sometimes history doesn't begin with grand speeches, charging armies, or violent revolutions. Sometimes it starts in silence, with a single, quiet no. On December 1st, 1955, a black woman, a seamstress, weary after a long day of work, sat down on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama. The moment lasted only 10 seconds, 10 seconds that defied a law, and ignited one of the most significant civil rights struggles in modern history. This is the story of how a small act of defiance can shake the foundations of a nation. To truly grasp the seismic impact of Rosa Parks' action, we need to travel back in time. The end of the Civil War and the abolition of slavery did not magically create an equal society in the United States. Instead, a new, insidious system of control emerged in the southern states: the Jim Crow laws. These weren't informal customs. They were state and local statutes that institutionalized racial segregation. Everything was segregated: schools, restaurants, public restrooms, even water fountains. And of course, public transportation. The law was explicit. White passengers sat in the front, black passengers in the back. If the white section filled up, a black person was legally required to give up their seat. This system wasn't an unfortunate accident. It was a carefully constructed architecture of racial hierarchy, designed to enforce a message of inferiority every single day. But who was the woman at the center of this historical storm? Rosa Louise Macaulay Parks was far more than just a tired seamstress. To see her that way is to miss the depth of her conviction. Long before that fateful day on the bus, she was a dedicated activist. As the secretary for the Montgomery chapter of the NAACP, she worked alongside its president, E.D. Nixon, meticulously documenting cases of racial discrimination, investigating violent abuses, and fighting for justice in a system stacked against her community. She had attended workshops on civil disobedience. When she sat on that bus, she wasn't just physically tired from her work. She was tired of the indignity. She was tired of the injustice. She was tired of obeying a law that was fundamentally wrong. Let's picture the scene. The bus journeyed along its route. More white passengers boarded and the front section filled up. The driver, James F. Blake, noticed a white man standing, looked back at the first row of the colored section, where Rosa Parks and 3 other black passengers were seated. He ordered them to get up and move to the back. 3 of them complied. The law, after all, was on the driver's side. But Rosa Parks remained seated. She didn't shout. She didn't argue or launch into a speech. She didn't physically resist. She simply held her ground with a quiet, powerful dignity. In that profound silence, her simple act of non-compliance did more than break a city ordinance. It exposed the moral bankruptcy of the entire segregationist system. Her refusal wasn't an act of aggression. It was an act of profound self-respect that challenged the very legitimacy of the law itself. Her subsequent arrest was not a failure of the system. It was the system functioning precisely as it was designed. She was taken into custody, charged, and found guilty of violating the segregation law. The authorities, this should have been the end of it, another minor incident, another enforcement of the established order. But they miscalculated. Something powerful and unexpected began to stir. Rosa Parks' arrest was the spark that ignited a long smoldering fire. The black community of Montgomery, organized and ready, decided it would no longer tolerate this daily humiliation. The news of her arrest spread like wildfire, and community leaders knew this was the moment they had been waiting for. What followed was one of the most remarkable displays of collective action in American history: the Montgomery Bus Boycott. For 381 consecutive days, the city's 50,000 black residents refused to use the buses. This was an immense undertaking. They walked miles to work each day, in the rain and the sweltering heat. They organized complex carpool systems, coordinating rides for thousands. They faced severe economic hardship, with many losing their jobs. They endured constant threats, harassment, and violence from white supremacist groups. But they did not retreat. Their unity was their strength. And out of this crucible of protest, a new, charismatic leader emerged to give the movement a voice and a strategic vision. A young, eloquent pastor named Martin Luther King Jr. under his guidance. The principle of nonviolent civil disobedience was no longer just an idea. It became an organized, sustained, and powerful force for change. Of course, Rosa Parks did not invent civil disobedience. This powerful idea stretches back through centuries of human history. It's a philosophical thread that connects thinkers and rebels who chose to challenge unjust laws, not with violence, but with moral courage. We see it in the ancient world with Socrates, who chose to accept his death sentence rather than renounce his philosophical teachings, thereby questioning the authority of the Athenian state. We see it with Mahatma Gandhi in India, who led a nation to independence from the British Empire through nonviolent resistance, like the famous Salt March. The concept has also been nurtured in less public forums, discrete societies, and intellectual circles. Like Freemasonry in the Age of Enlightenment, helped spread radical ideas of liberty, equality, and individual rights, laying the groundwork for revolutions. Change rarely begins with the masses. It begins with a single person, a symbolic act, a line drawn in the sand that declares this far and no further. After more than a year of relentless protests, the legal battle reached the nation's highest court. In November 1956, the U.S. Supreme Court declared that segregation on public buses was unconstitutional. It was a monumental victory, a triumph of persistence and collective will. The boycott had succeeded. But for Rosa Parks, the personal cost was immense. She and her husband both lost their jobs. Unable to find work in Montgomery and facing constant death threats, they were forced to leave the South and move to Detroit. History celebrates the heroic gesture, but it often forgets the profound personal sacrifice that follows. Rosa Parks became a global icon, but for years, she lived with the very real and dangerous consequences of her 10 seconds of courage. In the end, Rosa Parks did not win this fight alone. Her act was the catalyst, but it was the unity and sacrifice of thousands of ordinary people in Montgomery that turned that spark into a transformative fire. The boycott demonstrated the immense power of collective economic action and nonviolent protest. Yet without those initial 10 seconds of quiet defiance on that bus, without that one individual choosing to cross a boundary, it's possible that history would have waited another month, another year, or even another generation. This is how every great social movement is born, with one individual, one act of conscience, one no spoken at precisely the right moment. The question that lingers for all of us is not simply what Rosa Parks did. The real question is, what would you do if you were on that bus? If this video helped you understand how history is often shaped by small acts of immense courage, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel, because understanding the past is the essential first step toward transforming the future. Thanks for watching.